You ever wake up on a Saturday morning thinking the universe is finally going to cut you a break, and then boom, your entire sense of peace gets jump-started by the sound of an electric zap and a woman shrieking like she'd stepped on a live snake? Yeah, welcome to my neighborhood where coffee tastes better on the porch and HOA drama is basically a sport. I stepped outside that morning still in my slippers, and right there in my yard was Karen. Yes, that. Karen, the HOA president and self-anointed ruler of all things petty, clutching the steering wheel of her little white golf cart like she'd just survived the rapture. Smoke, I kid you not, was curling up from the wire cutters in her hand. She'd tried to snip my new electric deterrent wire and got herself lit up in the process. Nothing lethal. Mind you, just a jolt meant to keep raccoons from tunneling under the fence. But physics? Well, physics doesn't care about titles, does it? Let me tell you, I just stood there, coffee in hand, watching Karen flail around like a wind-up garden gnome on the fritz. I probably should have helped, but this was her fourth time trespassing that month, and honestly, karma was overdue for a cameo. It all started 6 weeks earlier when I put up a low-profile metal fence, the kind you see at fancy ranches, paid for it myself. City inspector signed off the whole deal. But apparently, I'd just committed the cardinal sin of ruining the neighborhood aesthetic. Her words, not mine. At first, it was just notes, those handwritten passive-aggressive essays she'd leave under my doormat. Once, she even taped a paint sample card to my mailbox. Desert taupe elegance, if you're curious. I ignored her in surprise she leveled up. One morning I caught her in my backyard with a tape measure, doing her best impression of a county surveyor. I said, "Karen, you're trespassing." She looked at me like I'd spoken Greek and said, "As HOA president, I have oversight authority. Lady, you are the board." Everyone else quit after she fined the VP for leaving his trash cans out 3 hours too long. I could have reported her, but what's the point when she runs the show? So I did what any reasonable person would. I started documenting everything. Videos, texts, timestamps. The irony is, you'd think someone so obsessed with the rules might actually follow a few herself. Things blew up the day I strung up that electric deterrent wire. Totally legal, solar-powered, rated for livestock. Even had warning signs every 6 feet. Karen, of course, lost her mind. She showed up pounding on my door, waving a highlighted printout of HOA guidelines like she was serving a warrant. "Unauthorized electrical installations are strictly prohibited," she barked. I said, "Karen, the HOA doesn't regulate the inside of a private fence. This is my side of the line." She blinked, tried to process it, then just declared, "It sends a message." "Good," I said and shut the door. From then on, she was like a cartoon villain cruising the street at odd hours, snapping pictures from every angle, never waving back when I smiled. So when I saw her this morning smoking and rattled, I just walked over, calm as can be. "Morning, Karen." "Rough day." She was pale, clutching her wrist like she'd survived a shark attack. "You electrified the fence." "You could have killed me," I said. "It's the same voltage as a cattle fence." "You're fine." She shrieked about calling the police, so I said, "Please do, and mention you trespassed, ignored warning signs, and damaged my property." She sputtered, looked at the bright yellow placards, and tried to shift blame. Classic Karen. But here's where the twist comes in. That afternoon, every inbox in the neighborhood pinged, "Urgent community alert. Dangerous electric installation." Attached were zoomed-in dramatic photos of my fence like I'd built the Berlin Wall. Calls started pouring in. Most folks laughed. Mrs. Bennett next door wanted to borrow my setup for her garden. A few were nervous, but honestly, Karen's got a history of crying wolf. Still, I knew how fast rumor can turn to fact in an HOA. So I pulled the play right out of her own rule book. Dug up the HOA charter page 4, buried in legalese, was a clause banning any alteration of private fences, meaning her wire-cutting escapade was a bigger violation than anything she'd ever accused me of. Next morning, I printed the photos from my security cam, her cart, her hand on the wire cutters time-stamped, and filed a formal complaint to the HOA, CCing the whole neighborhood. The next board meeting felt like a cross between traffic court and high school detention, Karen pacing like a cornered prosecutor, the other board members looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. When she started in on her speech, complete with dramatic photos, red circles, the works, I just waited. Then calmly, I handed over the stack of evidence, laid out the charter clause, and filed my official complaint. Somebody in the back actually clapped. She tried to pivot, of course, claimed she was conducting a safety inspection. I said with wire cutters on private property, ignoring 3 warning signs. Mrs. Dalton, one of the retirees on the board, looked over her glasses and said, "Karen, dear, I think you're the one in trouble here." The room chuckled. For once, Karen had nothing to say but threats. "This isn't over," she snapped and sped away. But I knew better. She didn't let up. The next week, she escalated to anonymous city complaints, fake code violations taped to my mailbox, forms so sloppy the city clerk laughed when I called. So I installed more cameras, set a decoy conduit with a motion alarm. Sure enough, one night the camera pinged. There was Karen sneaking around in her robe, snipping the decoy wire, only to set off the alarm and fall face first into my flower bed. I stepped outside and said, "Evening, Karen. Doing some late-night gardening." She was livid. "You're provoking me," I said. "You're doing that all by yourself." Still, the board had enough. After I shared the footage, her on camera sabotaging my fence, they called an emergency meeting. Karen was suspended. For a few days, it was almost peaceful, until a flatbed truck showed up at dawn, 2 men in orange vests unloading bolt cutters. And there was Karen, arms crossed, acting like a mob boss. "We're removing your fence," she said, ignoring the fact that she'd been suspended. But this time the sheriff rolled up Deputy Collins, cool as ever. "Ma'am, you're under investigation for trespassing. Contractors don't touch a thing." The workers bailed. Karen sputtered, and Collins started writing up another report. And you'd think that'd be the end, but no, she doubled down with fake violation notices, anonymous complaints, even started showing up at night in borrowed cars. When the sheriff traced her back to my street, violating her restraining order, he warned me to be ready. I was. I had backup batteries, cellular camera feeds, and everything wired up tight. So when she tried one last time, breaking in with hired muscle crowbars, the works, the alarms went off, cameras caught the whole thing, and by the time the sheriff showed up, Karen was standing in the wreckage, staring at the grass like she finally realized how far she'd fallen. This time she went to jail, real charges, real consequences. The neighborhood was finally, mercifully quiet. But here's the thing about people like Karen, they don't vanish, they linger. They try to rewrite the story from the shadows, turn you into the villain, make your victory feel like a burden. For weeks, there were weird emails, drive-bys from strangers, Facebook rants under fake names. The board dissolved, the HOA neighbors started talking again, and the lake finally became a place for peace, not battlegrounds. And I sat on my porch, feeling the air lose its tension, realizing it was never about the fence. It was about control, about someone who couldn't stand not being in charge, even if it meant burning everything down. The night I saw the moving truck in Karen's driveway, no lights, no drama, just quiet. Packing up, I realized the fight was finally over. Her house sat empty the next morning, for sale sign up, curtains gone, nothing left but dew on the grass between our yards. So here's my question. If you're still with me, how far is too far in the name of community harmony? Where's the line between protecting your peace and becoming the villain in someone else's story? Let me know in the comments, because I've got my answer. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA dictator, or you've got a wild neighbor story of your own, drop it below. Maybe together we'll figure out where that line really is.